I think it's understandable for anyone to want their story to be a big idea. Big, super complex, as big as this big boy right here. But today, I'm gonna try to explain to you why you should maybe forego a big idea. Not because you're a new writer, but because sometimes small idea is best. I got a question from a dear viewer, just like you. They have a story, and it's a story with an idea they really want to write. The issue, the problem, they can't help to continue adding things to it. They witness something cool, and I think this is all we can relate to. You watch a cool movie, you hear something, you play a game, you realize that there's a really cool thing out there, and you want to work that into your story. This is a writer's struggle that I realized I hadn't dealt with in a very, very long time. Mostly because I have developed internal systems to immediately squash this kind of feeling. Why? Because small is best. Start small. Start small. And I'm not saying this because you're a new writer. I'm not saying this because you're a new writer with maybe not a lot of experience telling a big complex story. It's not even about that. Just in general, less is more. Less is more, especially in story ideas. Not because less ideas and a much more narrow scope creates, in a way, a much more deep story. No, it's not even about that. Less is more. Because even when you think you're starting with a small story idea, that story idea is going to grow on its own. That story idea, because all stories are just seeds. Seeds we plant on the pages, and they grow. They grow without us realizing it. And as we write, as we go from page to page and word from word, it becomes something else. You have no idea until you make it to revision, and you do the first couple of passes, and you look at your story, and you realize, this is not about what I thought it was gonna be. Stories that you think are about achieving revenge can ultimately, when you make it all the way to revision, ends up being about something else. This story is not about revenge, it's about healing. This story is not about overcoming the grief of the past, it's about learning to forgive. You can't know what your story's about until you make it to revision. Because what you need sometimes is scope. The ability to step back and look at your story. Not as the line per line, word per word process of writing it, but as the collection of chapters and characters and pages and words that it actually is. Of course, this may be of little respite to our writing friend, who can't help but just continue to add things to their story idea. And for that, I offer a little bit of advice. Dear viewer, if you are struggling, continuously adding properties and ideas and concepts to this world, to this setting, to this outline, I would like to urge you to first do some inventory, review your story idea, what it has become, look at it, take away what really doesn't belong there. Because I know that it's very easy to watch a movie, or to play a game, or to watch a show, or to read a book, and think to yourselves, I should put some of that cool stuff in my pile of cool things that I want this story to be about. Do inventory. And as I said before, don't start with a dozen cool things, just pick one or two. Less is more. I'll tell you more in a sec. Grab a couple. Review what the story will be about, focusing on these couple of things. If you need to readjust characters, do so. If you need to readjust settings, do so. And then, go. Start writing. Actually start writing. That's the hard thing. That's the hard thing. That's the thing everybody dreads. That's the hard thing that, trust me, I've written dozens of books, and still the very first writing session is the worst one. Get it through. Start writing. Whether it's typing or by hand or whatever other method that you use for telling your stories, start. 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 Because it's hard. It's gonna be hard. But if we continue to procrastinate, if we continue to find ways that feel like work but aren't really actually pushing the story, that story's never gonna get told. And now, I'm gonna explain to you, in as quick a format as I can, why starting with less concepts for your story is ultimately for the best. I mentioned earlier that your story is going to expand no matter what. No matter if you start with no matter if you start with 10 different things you want the story to be about, werewolves and robots and vampires and magic, or just one thing, 2 kids falling in love. Whether it is 1 or a dozen story concepts and ideas, no matter what it is, it's going to expand, and that's exponential. The more you have, the more it's gonna grow. That's why I always encourage you to start small. And more importantly, and here's where we get to the real bit of this, starting small also really helps the revision process. Because, and I've been there, I'm revising right now. Halfway through a story, you think of a cool thing that might just work in your setting. And then when you make it to revision, the first draft's been over for months. You let the book sit, you pick it up, and you look at it and go, all this is gonna get cut off. All of it. It doesn't belong in the story. I, as the writer, externally drop this inside of the world. It doesn't belong in the world. It didn't come organically through the story. I just added it because I wanted to have that. And it turns out, when you do that, you either A, have to rework the entire story to make that work work with the parts of the story, and that means, because we're here to tell stories and to tell them good, to rework the entire baseline of the story. Or you can cut them all out. Listen, right during the climax of my last book, I really wanted to write a story about giant robots. I really wanted to, but trust me, I wanted to write about giant robots, and that story that I was writing, that I was about to finish, was not giant robots. I wanted to, but I certainly did not add robots in the final act, because 1, it would have made no sense, and secondly, I know myself, and I've been through this before, you're gonna end up editing it all out. And you think to yourselves, oh, that's only when you add things that are extraneous. No, sometimes naturally you add things that you think work, and they turn out not to work. Sometimes things work out. Sometimes they don't. I think, at least in my own personal experience, when I have added things external to the story, when I have added things because I wanted to have them in there, I've always ended up cutting them out. And it's always tedious and it's always work. I think, dear viewer, watching this, struggling, as I told you before, catalog what your story idea has become. Do inventory. Take what you really want the story to be about. Honestly, a couple things is enough. Trust me, your story is gonna grow. No matter what you do, your story is gonna grow in scope. Even if you think it's a story about 2 kids falling in love, it's gonna grow in scope. Trust me. Grab those couple of things, hold on to them, and get writing. And just start. And just start. Is that a long journey? Is it hard? Yeah, it really is. But you have to start. We, human beings, we're very silly. And we find the darnest ways to not do the scary thing. Sometimes that scary thing is calling your doctor, making that appointment, submitting your resume. Writing is also scary. No matter how many times, how many years you've been writing, it's still scary. That first session is always the hardest. And if you spent years starting stories and never finishing them, you may think to yourselves that you just don't have it in you. But I want to remind you today that if you sit down, you put your butt on that chair, and you get writing, today, by tomorrow that chain is broken. You cannot say you haven't written in forever, because you just did. You repeat that the next day, and then you repeat that the next day, and the next chance you have, and the next chance you have. You don't have to write every day, but what you need to do is to keep on writing. That's the way stories are told. There is no other way. No one's gonna show up one day and hand you your finished first draft. You have to put in the work, okay? And trust me, that story idea you have, you think 1 or 2 concepts is not cool enough? It'll get cool enough, trust me. It will blow out of proportion. All of my stories have done that. All of my stories have started small, And all my stories, I always start with like 3 characters, because always more characters show up. They always do. New locations get introduced, new powers are discovered. Stories change as we write them, and that's okay. And that's why I think, at the end of it all, you should start small and get writing. Okay? Okay. Today's question was sent by a viewer just like you. If you have a question of your own or a topic you would like me to answer in a future video, let me know in the comments down below. This video here is brought to you thanks to my Patreons. Patreon.com/mkieran is the #1 place to go if you want to support me and what I do. For as little as $1 a month, you can watch my videos a week before they go live on YouTube, and of course, have your name appear on the end slate of these videos. Today, I would like to give a big thank you and a shout out to A. Howard, Amelia, Angela Moore, Brenda, Harriet Holman, Irina Phoenix, Joe, Luki, Mark Maruska, Patch Aitchinson, Rain Misoa, and Soul Muse. Hey guys, thank you so much for your support. I hope this video was insightful. What are we here for, you guys? To tell good stories. But to get there, we gotta sit down, get your butt on that chair, and get writing done. So, as always, I'll leave you with a little thing that I always tell you. Today, dear friend, today is a good day to write.